Batman Caped Crusader is yet another animated depiction of the life and adventures of everyone's favorite Caped Crusader, Batman. Given that this tale has been told and retold countless times in multiple forms of media already, the makers of Caped Crusader understandably took a lot of creative liberties when making the show, and for the most part, a lot of these changes are actually well executed. That said, there are a few issues I found with the first season of Caped Crusader, and the biggest one has to be the way the show handled its villains. No woman in this show is actually bad. There's always this little detail or aspect of the female villains that justifies or tones down the effects of their evil doings. But on the flip side, every villainous male character is portrayed as the absolute worst human being, deserving of whatever terrible fate they end up receiving. And it's not even just about the villains. This women are always righteous, sympathize with them cliché ran through all the characters in the show. Even the Penguin received this treatment at the end of her episode. The men, on the other hand, are shown to be either complete douchebags, incompetent weaklings, or corrupt pushovers. Some of them even have all these traits combined. And this might sound like a joke, but I kid you not. Only 3 notable male characters are actually likable in the first season of this show: Batman, Alfred, and Commissioner Gordon. Let's start by talking about the female villains, and I think you'll start to see my point a bit clearer. Now, the Penguin was the first villain Batman went up against in this season, but I'm gonna talk about her last. I'm driving at a point here, and I think saving her for last will be better for context. The second female villain Batman faces is Catwoman. This was in episode 3. Okay, so Selina Kyle is the only daughter of a corrupt businessman who is currently in jail for tax fraud. She's a happy-go-lucky spoiled brat who does nothing but sleep all day and go out for parties at night, when she is implied to sometimes pickpockets to earn some money.
Well, I hear things tend to go missing around you, Miss Kyle.
She also loves bringing home stray cats. Since she doesn't work and isn't really earning money in any way, she hasn't paid her maid Greta for more than 3 years and is on the verge of being evicted from her apartment. One day, she sees a newspaper article about Batman and is inspired to design a cat costume and become a fully fledged burglar.
Fabulous, right? Not the word I would use.
She then begins breaking into homes and jewelry stores, making headlines and even becoming a wanted criminal. One night, she is ambushed by the cops, but she manages to fight off and outrun them. Unfortunately for her though, she is engaged by Batman, who subdues and leaves her to be taken by the cops. But for some reason, Gotham's DA, Harvey Dent, does not file charges against her in court, and she is set free the very next day. She immediately resumes her nightly robberies, but after falling for his trap one day, she is eventually caught by Batman, this time with enough evidence to actually put her in jail for some time. In the end, her maid Greta sells what little property she had left and leaves Selina to fend for herself. Now, the thing about Catwoman is that everything she does is played for laughs. She steals from people's homes, but it's not really shown to us as a crime, but rather this fun little game she is playing. One time she even kidnapped a cat from one of the houses she stole from, but they make it seem like it's okay because she likes cats. Now, something like this really shouldn't be that much of a problem because this is Catwoman after all. Her whole gimmick is being this sneaky thief that Batman comes across every now and then. But as I said before, she is not the only female villain whose crimes get downplayed. Harley Quinn is also portrayed as a not so evil bad guy in this season. Episode 5 focuses on Harleen Quinzel, a professional therapist in Gotham. She is usually recommended to high-class clients and even had some sessions with Bruce Wayne. Now, what she does is, she abducts any of her rich clients who she deems are corrupt or greedy, somehow takes them to a secret location by the edge of the city without anyone knowing, and tortures them both physically and psychologically till they agree to donate all their money to charity before releasing them. And to make sure they don't spill the beans to anyone, she also makes them become mentally subservient to her. This way, they follow her every command and will rather self-delete than reveal the truth about her operations. So she's basically doing to them what was done to Homelander as a child. She is also friends with Barbara Gordon and is romantically interested in Renee Montoya, a detective at Gotham PD. After some investigating, Batman and Barbara separately discover the truth about her. Turns out the building she uses as the playpen where she tortures her victims is the house of one of her previous victims, so they both end up going there to confront her. Harley seeks her brainwashed victims on Batman and manages to trap him before setting the whole building to self-destruct. As she's about to leave though, she sees Barbara's car nearby and realizing that she might be inside the collapsing building, goes back to save her friend. One thing leads to another and she ends up falling down a cliff. Later, Harley Quinn calls Renee and tells her she will be leaving Gotham for some time, leaving the detective heartbroken. What Harley Quinn does in this show is downright evil. She mentally assaults and traumatizes her clients with various forms of torture, but then they try to justify it by saying she's making them give money to charity. After her official sessions with Bruce Wayne were over, she tried persuading him into coming back for more, meaning she was probably planning on abducting him too. You know, I actually wonder how that would have played out. Harley's relationship with Renee was also something they used to really humanize her character. At the end of the episode, we are supposed to sympathize with her because she lost the good relationship she would have had with the detective. Again, this wouldn't have been a problem if most of the villains had this type of backstory and motivation, but only the female villains got this kind of treatment. And in fact, it was in this very episode that I began to notice this problem, because as soon as I saw Harley Quinn speaking to the corrupt clients she had kidnapped, I realized that all of them were men. Are there no corrupt women in Gotham, or does she just not take female clients? Episode 7 further perpetuated this sympathy for the female devil trope with Natalia Knight, an orphan with a rare condition that gave her superhuman strength. But in order to maintain this strength, she has to suck the life force of others. Natalia lives near a carnival with her brother Anton Knight, where they perform tricks for spectators using her strength. One night, Natalia lures some kids into her trailer and sucks out part of their life force. When Anton confronts her and tells her to stop, she forcefully pushes him aside and leaves him to die. Batman, who was investigating the case of the missing children, finds the trailer with the kids and Anton about to die from the bookshelf that fell on him. Before he dies, he tells Batman about her condition and begs Batman to save her because sunlight is harmful to her. Batman finds her in the process of sucking another kid's life force and stops her. They fight for a bit, but she soon overpowers him and begins sucking him dry too. Luckily, the kid interrupts her with his slingshot. Batman then tells her about Anton's death. She gets sad and he blocks the rising sunlight from burning her skin before finally taking her to a hospital. Natalia also falls in the category of not entirely evil for a couple of reasons. First of all, she is a little girl, so one can always say that she did not know any better. Secondly, her victims did not die, although if she had drained them a second time, they definitely would have, and she actually was planning on doing it.
As soon as they wake up, they'll tell everyone what happened. We'll be done for!
So we stop them from waking up.
And finally, in the case of her brother's death, she claimed that she didn't mean to kill him and didn't think he was going to die.
You killed him. I know you didn't mean to.
I didn't kill him, I couldn't!
But I mean, since I saw the way she acted immediately after pushing him in the trailer.
I can't feel my legs. Can't help. Please.
Who's being a baby now?
Yeah, I'm not buying this act. I also found it odd that Batman did not even bother trying to save Anton. I mean, he just left the shelf on him till he died. But when it came to Natalia, he saved her even after she literally just tried to kill him minutes ago. Oh yeah, one last thing to consider about Natalia is that her original character from the comics Nocturna is an adult woman and not the little girl she is portrayed as in this show, which begs the question, did they make her a little girl here to make us sympathize with her more? This question might sound like a stretch, but when you compare it with what they did with the Penguin, it might make a lot of sense. Okay, so the Penguin was shown in the very first episode of the show. She's a wealthy businesswoman who secretly runs a mob and is a rival to another mob boss, Rupert Thorne, one of the main antagonists of this season. After evading one of the attacks the Penguin had planned for him, Thorne mockingly tells her it was one of her 2 children who warned him about the attack. This enrages her, and she orders one of her henchmen to put him in a box and throw the box into the ocean.
Wait! No!
Turns out it was actually the other son who snitched on her, and after Thorne refused to protect him, he runs to Barbara Gordon, who reluctantly takes him to her father, Commissioner Gordon. After Penguin finds out about this, she decides to launch a missile and destroy the whole Gotham PD. In the end, Batman delays her long enough for everyone in the building to escape the explosion, and the Penguin is ultimately arrested. Now, this would have ended here and the Penguin would have been the only female villain without any justifiable reason for her actions, but then we got this scene.
By taking down her operation in one fell swoop,
You've just given another piece of the city to Rupert Thorne.
I failed tonight. That can't happen again.
So essentially what Batman is saying here is that the Penguin was a kind of necessary evil, since she was hindering Rupert Thorne from having full dominion over the underground world of Gotham. This was something that really pissed me off, because throughout this season, we are not even given enough reason to believe that Rupert Thorne is more dangerous than the Penguin. I mean, the Penguin was only shown in one episode, but damn, we know she is a crazy nutjob, because she straight up launches missiles at anything she considers a problem in the middle of Gotham. And for God's sake, stakes, she drowned her own son because of a rumor she heard from her rival. If anything, Batman should be happy he got rid of that psycho, because when it comes to Thorn, he is shown to be a more discreet mob boss. He does all his business on the ground and he actually loves his son. I would say the most outright evil thing we see about him this season is one of his henchmen pouring acid on Harvey Dent's face for collecting his money and betraying him, and it was never even shown if he gave the order. And again, he did not launch a missile in Gotham, so you cannot expect me to believe he's worse than the Penguin Batman, which brings me to the whole gender swap issue. To be honest, I don't have a problem with it because it doesn't really affect the plot and the character is still menacing, but on that note, I would like to say it was quite unnecessary because it served no real purpose. The only reason I can think of right now as to why they might have done the gender swap is for Batman to say she was unnecessary evil and that he failed by causing her arrest, because all male villains in this show have to be irredeemable assholes that all deserve to die. Take a look at Clayface for example. In episode 2, we see Basil Carlo, an actor who is always cast to play villainous roles because of his looks. Carlo has a crush on one of his co-actors, Yvonne Francis, but she does not have any feelings for him, though she respects him as an actor. One day, after she seemingly implies that things would have been different if he looked a bit better, Carlo gets desperate and meets Dr. Elman, who injects an experimental substance into his face, making it malleable. He then readjusts his face to look more handsome and approaches Yvonne, but to his dismay, she still rejects him. He then goes full Neanderthal and kidnaps her. Days go by and Detective Renee Montoya is assigned to the case of Yvonne's disappearance. Bruce Wayne was the last person known to be with Yvonne, so Renee invites him to the station for questioning. Before he leaves, he plants a bug on her jacket, which he later uses to listen in and follow her on her investigation. After Montoya questions Carlo, he fakes his death and proceeds to kill a number of his former associates. Batman soon confronts him, but he manages to escape. Detective Montoya later meets Carlo, currently disguised as Dr. Elman, who he had previously killed, and whose body, with the help of the experimental injection, he used as a decoy to fake his own death. When Montoya begins to get suspicious, he knocks her out and ties her up in a room where he has Yvonne bound and ready to be sliced in half. He tells them about everyone he has killed and how he plans on reenacting one of the scenes he had previously done with Yvonne, only this time he plans to kill her for real. Then out of the blue, Yvonne begins dismissively calling him out for being fake and using makeup to appear stronger than he really is.
I don't believe your performance. You're chewing on scenery, relying on makeup effects to enhance weak characterization. It's insincere, Basil. It's not real.
Honestly, I wasn't entirely sure what she was talking about here, because what the fuck did she mean by makeup? His face had quite literally been turned into clay. This is also something I noticed. The dialogue in this show sometimes feel out of place. Anyway, fortunately enough, Batman breaks in and incapacitates Carlo. Renee frees Yvonne, backup arrives, and Batman disappears before he is caught. Now, if you look at the story of Clayface, you'll see that he was clearly portrayed in a way that would not invoke any ounce of sympathy from the audience. His whole villain arc began because he was simping for someone who didn't even like him in the first place. Even after he makes his face more handsome, she still finds him repulsive. Then he kidnaps her, but even after that, she is still not really afraid of him. So nothing he goes through or even does has any point at all. Similar to Catwoman, everything he does is played for laughs. But unlike in her case where the crimes were the joke, Clayface is the joke of his story. Also, he actually killed people, so we already hate him for that. Yeah, this guy had no redeeming quality whatsoever. The only thing we can say about him from his story is that he is a pathetic simp who deserves our collective disgust. Okay, now moving on. Episode 4 had quite an interesting plot. So this was right after Catwoman's capture. The public is currently going wild over the news of Batman's existence. And with the mayoral elections around the corner, the corrupt mayor of Gotham sees this as an opportunity to boost the people's faith in him. So he orders Commissioner Gordon to focus solely on catching Batman. Gordon puts Montoya in charge of the operation, and she immediately gets to work. Using undercover officers, she begins staging some fake attacks in the city with the hopes of luring out Batman. But he sees through most of their acts and simply ignores them. Eventually though, he acts on one of their fake robberies, but they ultimately fail to capture him. Also, this was before Harley Quinn got exposed, so Renee invites her to the station to help with ideas on how to catch Batman. Harleen guesses that he would be more interested in supervillains than common thieves, so later that night, two corrupt cops, Arnold Flass and Harvey Bullock, secretly decide to help a villain called Firebug escape custody, so he can wreak some havoc in town in hopes of drawing out Batman. The plan works, but they are still unable to nab him, so in the end, they decide to eliminate Firebug instead of arresting and having him tell on them. Firebug's whole plot could be described as kind of tragic, because he was set up to die by the corrupt cops, but there are several reasons why we can't really sympathize with his character. Firstly, he was broken out of jail, so already we know he must have done some crime in the past that put him there in the first place. Secondly, this guy actually enjoys burning everything to the ground. I mean, just look at the smile on his face. There are some hints that he might not be mentally stable, but he is still an evil piece of shit. And finally, he definitely caused the deaths of at least a few people, and all for no reason whatsoever. Firebug's case is just so bizarre, it doesn't give us a chance to feel anything for his character really. The last person I'm going to focus on is Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. He is one of the main characters in the show and appears in almost all episodes. One might even call him the main villain of this season, but the way his character is portrayed is just terrible. Okay, so Harvey Dent is the district attorney of Gotham and is also running for mayor. The first time we see Harvey is in a court case against Barbara Gordon. He is trying to convict Barbara's client for crimes he may or may not have committed in the past. Now, if this was just a professional situation, then we could have just said he was simply doing his job, but that's not the case. This guy is a legit asshole right from the get-go.
It was a good closer, Miss Gordon, but you know you're gonna lose, right? I had that jury eating out of my hand.
In fact, given that this is the beginning of episode 1, Harvey Dent is likely to be the very first person you get to dislike when watching this show.
Heads, I'll ask for 20 years to life. Tails, he gets the chair.
I'm not betting a man's life on a coin flip. You're an ass, Dent.
And not just this episode, Harvey is continuously shown to be this insufferable douchebag with a hard-on for getting everyone who comes to court arrested, whether or not they actually committed the crimes they are being accused of.
You give me an arrest, and I can put on a hell of a trial. Make us both look good.
Will anyone do, or should I focus on finding the actual murderer?
This made it unbelievably confusing for me when he decided to drop the charges against Selina Kyle when she stood in court accused of robbery as Catwoman.
Well, Your Honor, since we have no evidence, it was Miss Kyle that committed these crimes and not the Batman. The people are willing to drop the charges and allow Miss Kyle another second chance.
What the f do you mean by no evidence? The cops who caught her in the act are sitting right behind you. Heck, they're as confused as I am right now. One of them was literally assaulted by this woman and has an injury on his goddamn face to prove it. What's funny is that when Barbara confronts him for his actions here, he confirms that Selina did not even bribe him to cover up or anything like that. It doesn't even sound like the two of them were even friends at all.
What is she, Harvey? A campaign donor?
Do you really think I'd sink that low? Well, maybe I would. If she weren't flat broke.
This was just another manufactured reason for us to dislike Harvey even more. Well, as the season progresses, things happen here and there and Harvey begins losing support for his campaign. This is when Rupert Thorne approaches him to make a deal. Although he initially refuses to work with Thorne, he eventually gives in and accepts Thorne's monetary support in exchange for a few favors. The first of which is to let one of Thorne's mob friends out of jail by helping him win his court case. During the case though, Harvey decides to convict the criminal.
We're ready to move forward on this case, and we'd like the defendant held in custody until trial.
Thorne's men are not happy about this at all, so one of them corners Dent in the restroom and pours acid on his face.
Hey Dent, here's what happens to double-cross.
Months after losing the election, Dent refuses to go outside of his apartment, so Bruce comes over and persuades him to go out for dinner. But then he starts hearing voices in his head telling him that everyone is judging him, and he ends up causing a scene by ripping off the bandages, revealing his disfigured face. Oh my god. What the f is this? This doesn't look like the results of an acid burn. This is like if half of his face got run over by a monster truck driven by Chuck Norris. I mean, what is this shit? Like, what the f? Anyway, after cowering away into the night, Dent goes full villain mode, hunts down the person who poured acid on his face and burns him alive. He then attacks Thorne in his home and is about to shoot his son, but is interrupted by Batman, giving Rupert enough time to escape. Dent then has a mental breakdown and is taken into custody, where he finds out that Barbara chose to be his lawyer. A few days later, Thorne puts a hit on Dent and has Flash and Bullock break him out so they can take him to his men to be executed. Dent manages to escape by causing them to crash their car. He is then found by Barbara, who had been following them. Unfortunately for them though, they are spotted by some bad guys who then all converge at the docks to find and eliminate Dent. Soon Batman, Commissioner Gordon and Renee Montoya all come to help the duo, and after a long and heated battle, Dent ultimately sacrifices himself to save Barbara from being shot by Flash. Batman then appears, scares the crap out of Flash with a gun and knocks the corrupt cop out. Before Dent dies, Barbara asks him why he saved her, and his reply summarizes his whole character arc in a few words.
Why did you do that?
Damned if I know. Barbara.
I think it's quite ironic that Dent actually became more likable after he became Two-Face, which is strange because he also annihilated a bunch of people as Two-Face. By the end of his story, the best you can say about him is that he saved Barbara's life, but then it was his fault she was in danger in the first place, so not really. If you think about it, there really isn't anything good about this character, just the illusion of a hero's death at the end. The first half of his time on screen was him being a jerk to mostly women, then the later half was riddled with the bad decisions he made, leading up to him becoming Two-Face, and then more bad decisions after that. I genuinely dislike this character, and it's not just him. I feel the same amount of dislike for all the male villains, because they were written to be as hate-worthy as possible. Meanwhile, the female ones had all these relatable backstories that invoke some level of sympathy from the audience. And like I said before, it's not just the villains who get this treatment. Basically all the male characters in this show are masterfully written to be hated. And if you do manage to see one that seems to be promising for a while, don't worry, it's just a front. Take Corrigan for example, a police officer who saved Barbara's life a bunch of times in episode 7 when a bounty was put on her. The reason why she had a bounty in the first place was silly as hell, but this guy risked his life just to protect her from the assassins, only for him to at the last minute reveal that he too wanted to kill her and take the money for himself. So sure enough, he is stopped and knocked out with one punch from Barbara. Look, I get that Gotham is a corrupt city and all, but are only the men corrupt? How come the only trustworthy cop Commissioner Gordon has is Renee? Why is she not corrupt? I'm quite sure if this show had its way, even Gordon would have been a truth-hiding, justice-bending douchebag. And it's not just the police that follow this rule, even the male civilians are bad. That is why Harley Quinn only had men in her torture pen. Coming into Batman Caped Crusader, I tried to approach it as its own telling of the tale of Batman. That's why I made sure not to compare it to any previous Batman movie or TV show in this video. One of the biggest problems with Hollywood is that most times they find it very hard to balance their products. Previously, they used to over-sexualize the female characters. Now they are begrudgingly antagonizing the male ones. Either way, it does not make for good entertainment. Batman Caped Crusader really tried not to make what it was doing obvious, and I'm sure a lot of people watched it without even noticing any of this stuff, but for me, it kind of ruined what should have been another Batman classic, and I know some of you feel the same way. Word is the show got renewed for a second season. I honestly hope they do a better job with that one. Give us a non-biased Batman story, in fact any story, and see if the audience don't praise it wholeheartedly. Look at Arcane, or even Blue Eye Samurai for example. They are not 100% perfect, but they sure did way better jobs of handling the portrayals of their good and evil characters. There is something to like and something to dislike about all the main characters from these two shows. Starting from the main antagonist straight up to the main protagonist, no one is painted as purely black or white. And if you think about it, that's what Gotham should feel like. And that's how Batman Caped Crusader should have been written. Well anyway, that's about it. Stay safe everyone.